Well, welcome to Christ in Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible commentator and cultural analyzer. And today we're going to be looking at a pop culture figure that was dominant during the early decades of the 21st century, and that is the figure of Tony Soprano and his show, The Sopranos. And you say, well, why are you going to analyze this show? Because this show has had influence in our culture. It was very popular back in its day. And I have taken the time to watch some of the episodes of this show. And I wanted to just give my impressions because we can learn a lot about seeing people's failures and faults. We can learn something about our own walk with God and learn some of the pitfalls to avoid. It's sort of like a little reverse teaching of Proverbs, because Proverbs is geared toward helping us to live according to the will of God and live the right way in this life. Proverbs doesn't give us a whole lot of insight into the next life. It doesn't talk a lot about heaven. It doesn't teach some of the higher spiritual truths like you might get in the New Testament or in, say, the Gospel of John, especially. The spiritual insights that John gives us are just incredible. But it does help us live the daily grind and help us live day to day in this world, in this material world. And until we get to heaven, that's what our agenda is. We have to live in this world and be a good follower of Christ in the process. So we can learn about the failures and faults of people like that are in this TV series, Sopranos. I think it was 6 seasons, and it was one of the most popular TV shows around. And it's about a gangster, a mobster, a mafia member, Tony Soprano, and his family and friends and his associates in this crime family, and their ups and downs of life, and so on and so forth. So they get into all kinds of situations, and I don't actually recommend the Sopranos as TV viewing. It's like R-rated. It's got a lot of profanity. It's got some nudity. It's got violence. It's not a good family show, but it is sort of a reverse of, like I said before, the wisdom of Proverbs. It shows all of the foolishness of the world. It shows the foolishness of carnality. It shows the foolishness of rebellion with God. And so I'm going to talk about Tony Soprano and just go over some of the things that we can learn not to be like, because this guy is a role model of how we are not to live out our lives in this world. The very opposite of the book of Proverbs that shows us how to live our lives in this world. Tony Soprano is an example of how not to live our lives in this world. And I'll go through some of the characteristics that I have listed. First of all, this gangster, mobster, Tony Soprano, the leader of the crime family, is immoral. Okay, right off the bat, immoral, unfaithful to his wife, cheating on his wife regularly, consistently. It's not like he slips up once in a while. He is a shamefaced adulterer. And his wife knew about it, kept it quiet until the point where it became so obvious and she learned it so casually that she wanted a divorce and they separated and then they got back together. But this guy is just without shame. That's part of life for him, committing adultery, indulging in any pleasure he wants. So bad, bad, bad. The Bible teaches self-control. It teaches us to be faithful and come through on our covenants, the covenant of marriage especially, to be faithful. The Ten Commandments of the Old Testament says, thou shalt not commit adultery. I mean, this is so clear and so basic. Even secular people today in our godless age will tell you, yes, if you're in a committed relationship, you should be faithful to your wife, or if you're a man. If you're a woman, you should be faithful to your husband. And Tony Soprano and people like him disregard that command. They disregard God's laws. They live outside of God's laws. Second, he is hypocritical. And you see this in the way he pretends that he's a good family man. He pretends that he is faithful to his wife when his family's around, and yet he does commit adultery very casually on a regular basis all the time, and visits prostitutes and forms relationships outside of his marriage and has these romantic affairs. It's just pure adultery. There's no two ways about it. He's a loose man. He has no self-control. And also, he pretends that he's a part of the church as an Italian-American, traditionally part of the Roman Catholic Church. And you see him in church for weddings. You see him in church for baptisms. You know, the whole Godfather thing where they put in their time at church. Some of these crime bosses attend Mass regularly in the big cities like New York City, and yet they're hypocrites. They live outside of the will of God. They have no feelings for just breaking every law that God has ever given, disobeying every command, and then yet they'll show up in church and pretend to be good Catholics. And this is just such hypocrisy that it's hard to even watch. The lies, the cheating, just the crime, the stealing, just the criminal behavior, and then coming to church like you're just one of these little angels, piety and pious and around the priests and acting like you're a good, godly man. No, this is hypocrisy. And we need to make sure that in our lives that we do not fall into any type of hypocrisy. You know, do not try to come across a certain way that you're not. If you're living a two-faced, hypocritical life, repent, change. Do not follow in that way. Another characteristic of Tony Soprano, the crime boss on television series Sopranos, is he is angry all the time. He's anger. Now, this is one of the characteristics of these kinds of people, these mobsters, these organized crime figures. They don't know how to control themselves. They are out of control. They get angry. You know, somebody says something they don't agree with, or doesn't sit well with them, or crosses them, and they'll beat the person up. That's another characteristic of these guys. They're violent. They have no self-control. They let their anger go. They indulge their anger. You know, the Bible teaches us that we're to practice the fruit of the Spirit. Okay, this is totally the opposite of these guys. These crime bosses and organized crime people, they just don't have restraint. They think they have restraint. They talk about having restraint, you know, like, okay, no, I'm not going to kill this guy because he crossed me this time. But if he does it again, I will. That's not showing restraint. That's just showing a degree of anger that you haven't gone to number 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. You don't automatically go to 10, but they'll go to like 7 or 8 at the drop of a hat and beat someone to the point of death, or beat them to a pulp, or, you know, whack their leg and break their knuckles, or they'll just do violence against people. They're violent people because they don't control their anger. And this is a lesson to us. Control your anger. Don't let your anger control you. That's what these guys do. They let their anger control them. So this Tony Soprano, he's always angry. He always gets angry real quick, too. He's got a short fuse. And he doesn't care. You know, if he kills somebody, if he beats them up, if he injures them, ruin somebody's life. He just doesn't care. Also, they're impulsive and emotional. These people live by their emotions. And we are taught in the Bible, you cannot live by your emotions. You have to have self-control. James Dobson wrote a book about 20 years ago, I think it was, where the title was, Emotions, Can You Trust Them? The answer in the whole book is no, you can't trust your emotions. You can't go on the basis of feelings. You can't live your life on the basis of feelings. Campus Crusade used to have like on the 4 spiritual laws, they had a page where there was faith, fact, feeling. So out in front is faith. And second is the facts. And then feelings are last. You cannot make feelings the principle of your guidance in life, or else you will act out on your feelings. If you're mad at someone, you'll hit them. Why? Because you're angry with them. You let your feelings control you. If you're impatient, you jump to the head of the line. Why? Because you have a feeling of impatience. And that's what happens when people allow their emotions to control them. Well, these crime bosses and these mobsters, they're always acting on their feelings instead of like counting to 10 and controlling themselves and controlling their temper and their anger. They're acting out on those. They're indulging the flesh. This is called the flesh, the carnal flesh. And we're told to suppress the flesh. Naturally, humanly speaking, we've inherited the natural sin of Adam and Eve, the original sin. We all have that sin nature. We are not to indulge the flesh. We're not to feed the flesh. We're not to just let ourselves go in any direction that we feel, because if we do, we're going to go deeper and deeper into sin. And well, that's what these mobsters do, like the Tony Soprano crowd. They let their emotions lead them, and then they have no self-control. So there's a character in the Sopranos movie, Paulie, and this guy, if he gets angry enough, he's just talking to someone with no intention, no plan to kill this person, but this person gets him so mad, he'll start beating him up. And the same way with Tony Soprano, the same way, Tony Soprano could be talking with somebody, and then he gets mad and he starts beating somebody up and ends up killing the person with his hands. Cold-blooded murder. Because he can't control his emotions. And a lot of these mobsters are that way. And so we need to not be like that. Again, role models for not being this way. Another characteristic is pride. Oh, the honor. These guys have a lot of pride and honor. And if you say something or do something against them or their family or their friends or their crew, their mobster crew, they take it as a personal offense. And the honor is a great big deal with these guys. Whereas, Christ teaches us in the Bible to forgive. Someone slaps you on one cheek, you turn the other, meaning don't keep track of personal slights and insults, and don't repay insult for injury and injury for injury and insult for insult. Don't do the tit for tat. Don't seek revenge. Learn how to forgive people. Absorb that. Get rid of that cycle of I'll beat you and then you beat me and I beat you. But these guys don't do that. They don't follow any of that. I mean, it's like the whole New Testament and the teachings of Christ are totally absent. They have no knowledge of it. Even though they claim affiliation with the church, they have no knowledge of the teachings of Christ, and they don't turn the other cheek, and they don't forgive. They just get even. And so, again, this is a problem that we need to learn from and not be that way. Don't be full of pride to the point where you're always offended by people's slights and their words and insults and jokes and actions that rub you the wrong way. Don't be so sensitive like these guys. These guys are walking around with a chip on their shoulder looking for a reason to get mad and angry and violent. And we need to learn to not be like this. Totally opposite of the Bible. Totally opposite of the Christian life. And yet these guys, this is their lifestyle. Another characteristic that might summarize Tony Soprano and his crew and people around him, ungodly. Ungodly. They just don't have any interest in the things of God. They don't have any interest in thinking about God, which is basically theology. Theology just simply means thinking about God. Everybody thinks about God. Some people, like the Soprano people, don't think about him very much. I think of the whole family and friends and crew and everything in the Sopranos, I think the Tony Soprano's wife, I think her name is Carmen, she probably thinks about God more than any of them. It actually showed a part where she actually is reflecting about the Lord. It shows her praying. She actually has more of a God consciousness as any of the others. But some of these guys, including, I think, Tony Soprano, God is so distant, he might as well not even exist. And he's totally indifferent toward the idea of God and Jesus Christ. The only time he'll talk about Jesus Christ is in a swear word context. He'll use it as a profanity. So these people are ungodly. This is an example of almost total indifference to the whole understanding of God, the Bible, the Christian faith. And while they'll maybe have nostalgia about like a church that they grew up in their neighborhood, they have really no interest in attending the church, or if they do have to attend a church for some wedding or a funeral, they do a lot of funerals, as you would expect, because they're people, the mobster culture generates a lot of dead bodies. So there's a lot of death in the mobster culture. So they're in the church a lot for funerals, but it's just a social thing. It's just something you do. It's a tradition. So they're an ungodly crew. Another thing is vulgar. I mean, everything is vulgar. They're profane. The F word is used in every sentence. You can't utter a phrase without using the F word a few times. I mean, this is part of the mobster culture, and they're just very profane people. They're profane in front of their wives. They're profane, not as profane when they're in front of their wives and family, but they are profane. And they curse, they use offensive language, they're dirty language, immoral language. It's just the kind of attitude they have is it doesn't matter who they offend. They don't care if they offend you. They walk around with a chip on their shoulder. They don't try to be what the Bible talks as loving. They're not loving. They may be loyal in the sense that they have this unwritten agreement between them. They're not going to what they call rat out each other, which is basically go to the police or the FBI and start talking about the activities of the crime family. That is like the number one capital sin. That's like the cardinal sin, is to tell and get your fellow mobsters in trouble. And a lot of them will sit in jail for decades just in order to not rat out, as they call it, their family and the people in the culture of the gang. And that's about the only principle they have. They do have some loyalty to family, but that loyalty to their friends and family lasts as long as until they feel that they've done something bad enough to warrant death, and then they'll kill their best friend. They'll beat their best friend up and put him in the hospital and kill him. So it's a really violent, vulgar, ungodly culture, and we need to stay away from that. Don't even implement any of that into your life. They're also materialistic and money-loving. They kill, they injure, they steal, they deceive, they lie. They do this all for what? The money, the business. You know, they'll kill someone for $20,000. They'll kill someone for coming into the neighborhood where they have their business and taking business away from them. They'll go up to the person and warn them and say, hey, look, get out of here. This is my territory. If the person doesn't leave, they'll come up and kill the person. They have no regard for human life. They do not respect basic human rights. The imago Dei, the image of God in each person, that's just nothing to them. The only thing they care about is money and material possessions. They will violate every command in the Bible to get an extra buck, and to be loyal to the crime family. So it's really a sick and twisted world. And we're seeing more of that, in fact, today. Maybe not to the extreme of the organized crime families like the Sopranos. They may not carry out killings, gang killings. They may not beat people up today, but there's a lot of lying and deceiving in business now. I'm seeing that salespeople, as less and less of a Christian influence on our culture develops during the secularization of our Western world, I'm seeing salesmen lie. They're just willing to lie. You know, I mentioned before, I think in another video, we're trying to sign up for a cellular phone plan, and these salesmen will sell you anything and get you to agree. And then when it comes to the billing department, you get billed this totally separate plan, and you say, well, look, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for that. Oh, well, we can't do that. So in other words, the salesmen are they feel like they're free to lie and cheat and deceive as much as they want, as long as they can get you to sign up for it, and hoping, I guess, maybe you don't press back and say, look, this is not what I signed up for. But yeah, there's a lot more of that: cheating, deceiving, and just outright deception. Another characteristic, they're just bad characters. They lack virtues. These organized crime figures, they lack the virtues. Now, they think of themselves, they style themselves as, you know, perpetuators of the true Roman Empire. They see themselves as soldiers of the Roman Empire. And so they have virtues of soldier, military values, but really they will sell out anybody, and they will cheat and steal and lie and deceive people. This Tony Soprano character, he lies and cheats to his wife, steals from friends. He'll do anything he can get away with. That's pretty much what he can do. He will push his ability to deceive as far as he needs to get what he wants. Very selfish. This is another characteristic. These guys are selfish. They know what they want, and they're not going to take no for an answer. So you either give them what they want, or they will either injure you, ruin your life, or even kill you. And they will take it to that extreme. Now, most people, thank God, in society, they will not take it to that extreme. Business is a cutthroat area where some businessmen will do this same thing. And politics, again, there's a lot of this same kind of general activity in politics, unfortunately. But most people will not take it to the point where they'll actually kill another person to get what they want. It's just a lawless environment. That's another characteristic, lawlessness. These guys will go outside of the law at any point. The law is not there for them. It's for you. That's their attitude. You're supposed to obey the law. They can break the law whenever it's to their advantage, and they do. So they're willing to play around with the law and play outside of the law. And the only self-restraint that they show is that if they were to be as bad as they want to be, that would bring negative feedback from other people. Like if this Tony Soprano, if he were as selfish as he wanted to be, then people would look at him and not like him because he would be so selfish. He would be cheating and stealing and lying and deceiving everyone all the time, and nobody would trust him. So he can't be as bad as he wants to be, even though he'd like to be that bad. But even he has to hold back and have some self-control in order to work with other people. But believe me, he would be 10 times as bad as he is portrayed in this TV show if he could get away with it. But he can't get away with it because he has to deal with what? The FBI and the police, his own associates, his family, and there are constraints that are put on these guys just by virtue of being in a civilized society. And if you're really, really, really ugly and bad, everybody is going to turn away from you because they don't want to be a part of what you're a part of. So he has the only self-restraint for these guys is just the negative feedback they would get for being as bad as they want to be. But as far as their own spiritual and moral self-restraint, forget about that. They don't have it. And this shows you what happens if people don't have the fear of the Lord. It says in the Bible, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And here is an example of it. If you want to look at men, adults, who have basically decided that they're going to be their own God. They're going to set their own laws. Morality for them is simply whatever they want. And the standard for them is whatever is good for them. And so it's totally a self-centeredness, a total lack of love for other people. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. That is not applied in their case. They don't do unto others as they would want them to do unto. Their rule is do unto others before they can do unto you. And this makes for a law of the jungle kind of a situation. It's kind of like kill or be killed. Might makes right kind of a situation. And there's a lot of just ugliness in this kind of life. So I think we can learn a lot from this show as to how not to conduct our lives and how not to lead our families and how not to have a marriage like Tony Soprano does and how not to have friends like he does and how not to do things. We can take this bad example of a person, and he is a bad person. He's a bad person. Even though he's a likable character on TV, this is a bad, bad person. And no one should ever want to be like him or even copy anything that he is about. But we can learn from him and say, let's stay away from those things. Let's follow the way of God. That's the best policy. We'll talk to you next week. God bless.